I used to believe the worst kind of betrayal was the one that came suddenly, loud, brutal, ripping the floor out from under your feet. But that's not how it starts. No, it creeps in like a shadow at sunset, subtle, creeping, silent. If you had asked me a year ago what my marriage was like, I'd have said it was solid, dependable, built on almost 20 years of shared history, kids, holidays, inside jokes, and those little glances across the dinner table that used to mean something. I worked hard, harder than most, building my contracting business from nothing, bringing in late hours and calloused hands, while she, Kendra, kept the house warm, took care of the kids, and texted me goodnight when I was stuck finishing a job across town. We were a team. At least, I thought we were. Until the nights got quieter. Until her phone never left her hand, but her laughter stopped landing on me. Until she started smiling at nothing, and not in the way she used to smile at me. At first, I chalked it up to stress, the kids, her job at the dental clinic, maybe early onset midlife blues. I bought her flowers on a Thursday, just because. I planned a weekend getaway to the mountains. She smiled, thanked me, and scrolled Instagram the whole drive up. I told myself it was just a phase, that she'd come back to me eventually. But things kept shifting. She started dressing different, tighter, more revealing, more deliberate. She started coming home late, always with some excuse, always just tired. There were no more complaints about my long hours, no more nagging about dinner plans or laundry, and that should have been a relief. But it felt like the silence that follows a storm you didn't see coming. And still, I didn't dig too deep. Because deep down, I think part of me knew that if I looked too hard, I'd find something I couldn't unsee. Something I wasn't ready to admit. Then came the moment that cracked the foundation, a random Tuesday night when I reached for her hand on the couch, and she pulled it back like my skin was made of fire. She didn't even look at me, just stood up, grabbed her phone, and walked upstairs. That was the night something shifted in me, something slow and dangerous. Because I didn't just see the writing on the wall, I finally admitted to myself that someone else had written it. And suddenly, I wasn't a husband trying to hold his marriage together. I was a man on the verge of discovering just how deep the betrayal ran, and how far I might be willing to go when I finally uncovered the truth. It happened the way most things like this do, not with drama or suspicion, but by accident, completely unplanned, while I was looking for a recipe. Sounds stupid, I know, but I had this idea to surprise Kendra with dinner, thought maybe, just maybe, we could have one of those nights we used to. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter, screen up, unlocked. I picked it up to search a chicken pasta recipe we once made together, something stupidly sentimental like that. But right as I tapped the browser icon, a text notification slid across the top of the screen like it was begging to be seen, glowing like a slap to the face. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again, face-blowing kiss, Eli. That one sentence didn't just punch me in the gut, it changed everything. Eli Matthews, her coworker, a guy I've barbecued with, watched Sunday football with. I've handed that man beers in my own backyard while my wife made jokes about his ugly sandals. And now I was reading proof, real, undeniable proof, that he'd been in my wife's bed. I just stood there, holding it in my hand, fingers twitching like I was gripping a live wire. My heart was hammering so loud I couldn't hear the kitchen clock anymore. When she came downstairs a few minutes later, laughing at something on the TV in the other room, I didn't even speak at first. I just handed her the phone and looked at her like I'd never seen her before. And to this day, I will never forget what she did next. She smiled, like I was the one caught cheating. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said, so casually, like it was just an awkward text to a friend, not the smoking gun of an affair that blew up our entire marriage. I asked her why. "Why, Eli? Why now?" And without blinking, she said, "Because I'm bored, Derek. You're a great husband. You do everything right. But I feel like I'm dying inside. Eli makes me feel young again. Alive." That was the moment something broke inside me, and I swear I felt it snap. I realized then that I'd been loving someone who had already left me emotionally, mentally, probably years ago. What made it worse wasn't just the betrayal itself, but the way she justified it, as if my consistency, my stability, the very things that built this life she lives in, were the reasons she needed someone else. Like I was a burden she'd been carrying instead of the man who sacrificed his sleep, his body, his youth to give her everything she asked for. She said I had become predictable, that I was a nice guy, but not exciting. As if monogamy was some outdated fashion trend she'd outgrown. And the most twisted part? She wasn't even sorry. Not once. She said she still loved me, just differently now. Differently. That word rang in my ears for days after. I stood there in that kitchen, frozen, a man undone by one message, one smile, and one sentence that made my world fall out from under me. And in that silence, I promised myself something. If she could lie to my face with a smirk, then I could walk away without looking back. And when I did, I wouldn't just leave. I'd rise. I wish I could tell you that after she confessed, she broke down crying, that some part of her, any part of her, showed remorse or guilt, that she even tried to take ownership for what she'd done. But that's not what happened. What happened was worse. She didn't just justify the affair, she blamed me for it. You made it too easy to stop caring, she said, with that same stone-faced calm that made my blood run cold. You're always so steady, always in control. I needed more than stability, Derek. I needed to feel alive again. I stared at her, genuinely stunned. This woman, the same woman who once clutched my hand during our child's birth, who cried on my shoulder after her mother's funeral, was now looking me in the eyes and telling me I wasn't enough, not because I failed, but because I succeeded too much, too consistent, too reliable. She made it sound like love was a punishment, like the life we built together had somehow strangled her. And the worst part? A tiny, poisoned voice inside me started to believe her. Gaslighting is a funny thing. You don't feel the flame go out all at once. It happens in flickers, little doubts worming their way in like termites under the floorboards of your sanity. She said I didn't excite her anymore, that I didn't challenge her, that I had grown boring, predictable. She said Eli made her laugh, that he looked at her like a woman again, not just a wife or a mother. I stood there, nodding like a fool, apologizing to the woman who had betrayed me, as if I had broken something inside her by doing my best to keep our world spinning. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I didn't sleep on the couch. I grabbed a pillow, an old hoodie, and crawled into the front seat of my truck. I parked outside a 24-hour gas station and stared at the glowing neon sign until my eyes burned. I stayed there for 3 days. Not one call from her. Not one text asking where I was. As if I had vanished, or worse, as if I'd never mattered at all. You learn a lot about a person when you remove the illusion of consequence. She knew I wasn't violent. She knew I wasn't the type to yell or throw things. So she said what she wanted, did what she pleased, and then had the audacity to walk around our home like I was the one who wrecked it. I stopped shaving. I didn't eat for almost 48 hours. I listened to old voicemails from her, once where she used to call me her rock, where she said she couldn't breathe without me, and I wondered if any of it had ever been real, or if I'd just been the background actor in a movie where she played the starring role. 3 days in that truck taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. When your world explodes, you don't just look at the wreckage, you start picking through it. And that's when I realized I wasn't going to beg her to love me again. I was going to make damn sure she regretted ever stopping. I didn't know Rock Bottom had a public address system until Kendra posted a picture of herself and Eli, arm in arm, sipping overpriced cocktails on the rooftop bar we used to celebrate our 10th anniversary, with the caption, "New chapters with Old Soul's Black Heart." That image hit me like a freight train to the chest, not because it was unexpected, but because it was so deliberate, so pointed, like a sniper shot straight to whatever was left of my dignity. And it didn't stop there. She paraded him around town like a trophy, bringing him to the same brunch spots we used to frequent, showing up at mutual friends' gatherings with him draped on her like some second-hand accessory she wanted everyone to envy. Worse yet, she started acting like I was the ghost in the room, talking over me at our kids' school meetings, mocking my silence, laughing too loud like it was all a performance and I was the forgotten stagehand. The people who once smiled at me with respect now offered awkward glances, like they weren't sure if they should pity me or avoid me altogether. At work, my hands started shaking again. I missed deadlines, snapped at employees, forgot to send invoices that used to live on autopilot in my brain. My guys, the same crew I'd built from the ground up, brick by brick, started tiptoeing around me like I was a ticking bomb. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, and when I did eat, it was vending machine junk that made me feel worse. The days bled together. I couldn't look in the mirror without hating the man looking back. Then, one afternoon, while dragging a half-finished set of blueprints across my cluttered desk, I got a call from my old man, my father, retired carpenter, 78 years old, 2 bad knees, 3 heart stents, and still tougher than nails. "Swing by," he said, like it was nothing. Garage doors acting up. I almost didn't go, but something made me turn the truck around. He didn't even ask what was wrong, didn't need to. He just handed me a wrench, pointed to the busted hinge, and said, "You fix a thing by getting your hands on it." not by staring at it from the couch. We worked in silence, the kind of silence that speaks more than words ever could. When the job was done, he handed me a beer, looked me square in the eyes, and said, "You gave her everything you had, son. That doesn't make you weak. What makes you weak is letting her keep what's left of you." That line hit harder than anything I'd heard since this nightmare began. He didn't hug me, didn't preach, just walked back into the house and left me there, standing in that old driveway with a wrench in one hand and something I hadn't felt in weeks in the other, clarity. That was the day the fog started to lift. That was the moment I remembered who I was, not the broken man she left, but the man who built something from nothing. And now? Now I was about to rebuild again, not for her, not even for revenge. For me. They say a man doesn't change until he's been broken, really broken, shattered into so many pieces that the only way forward is to rebuild from the ground up. That's where I was. But I didn't want to rebuild into the man I used to be, the quiet provider, the dependable shadow, the guy who put everyone else first until there was nothing left of him to give. No. This time, I was going to become something new, something unshakable. I started small, laced up a pair of old running shoes and hit the road at dawn with music pounding in my ears and a burning in my lungs that reminded me I was still alive, even if it didn't feel like it yet. I signed up for a gym membership, got a trainer, started lifting weights like my anger had mass and I needed to push it off my chest one rep at a time. I stopped eating gas station sandwiches and started fueling my body with something better, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I was done poisoning myself for the comfort of others. Next came the wardrobe. I threw out the tired jeans and paint-stained hoodies that had become my uniform, the clothes that screamed married man who stopped trying. I got fitted for suits, invested in good cologne, learned how to look like the man I was becoming. But what mattered more than the exterior was what I did on the inside. I found a therapist, a no-nonsense Navy vet named Carl who looked like he could bench press a Buick and didn't flinch when I told him I was losing my mind. For the first time in my life, I sat across from someone who didn't try to fix me. He just let me bleed out the words until I realized I wasn't crazy for being loyal, and I wasn't weak for being hurt. And when I walked out of that office each week, I felt lighter, like I'd left a piece of the pain behind on the couch and didn't need to carry it home anymore. Then, on a whim, and maybe a little revenge-fueled impulse, I walked into a Harley dealership and bought a motorcycle. Matte black, loud, dangerous. Just sitting on it felt like rebellion. I started going on weekend rides, taking long roads with no destination, just letting the wind scrape the old version of me off my back mile by mile. I reached out to friends I hadn't seen in years, guys I'd pushed away during the marriage because Kendra didn't like them, or because I was too tired trying to keep the house standing alone. We grabbed beers. We told stories. They reminded me who I used to be, the guy who laughed hard, loved harder, and wasn't afraid of living out loud. And slowly, I felt it, the quiet, seismic shift that happens when a man reclaims his soul. I wasn't fully healed, not yet, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up dreading the day. I woke up hungry for more. And this time, I was going to take everything back, piece by piece, mile by mile, rep by rep, and nothing, not her, not Eli, not the past, was going to stop me. If someone had told me that the first woman who'd make me feel something real after the wreckage Kendra left behind would walk into my life wearing muddy boots and balancing a tray of deviled eggs, I'd have called them insane, but that's exactly how it happened. It was a family barbecue for a mutual friend of my cousin's, just another Saturday gathering filled with lukewarm beer, folding chairs, screaming kids, and a dozen people asking me if I was doing okay. With those pity-tilted heads that made me want to disappear. I wasn't expecting anything other than small talk and overcooked ribs, but then she walked in tall, tan, hair pulled back in a loose braid, the kind of smile that made you forget everything wrong with your day. She bumped into me on her way to the cooler, muttered a quick apology, and cracked a joke about running low on charm but never short on sarcasm. I laughed, a real, guttural laugh that caught me completely off guard. I hadn't done that in months. We ended up seated at the same picnic table during lunch, and before I knew it, we were 3 beers deep into a conversation that danced between guilty pleasure movies, motorcycle road trips, and bad sibling stories. She told me she worked in community outreach, helping veterans transition into civilian careers, and that her favorite kind of weekend was one where she could disappear into a cabin with a dog, a good book, and a bottle of red wine. There was something grounding about her. No airs, no performance, just this steady, warm honesty that felt like standing in sunlight after a storm. I never asked her last name, and she didn't ask mine, which felt strangely perfect. For once, I wasn't the guy whose wife cheated. I was just Derek, just a man enjoying the company of a woman who didn't look through him or past him, but at him. And there was something magnetic about the way she listened, like every word I said actually mattered, not out of pity or politeness, but because she genuinely gave a damn. She told me she wasn't close with her brother anymore, said he'd always been more style than soul, the kind of guy who chased flash over substance. I didn't press, because honestly, I didn't care who her brother was. What I cared about was how her laugh made me feel human again, how her eyes didn't flicker with judgment when I stumbled over my words, and how for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was fighting to keep my head above water. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that dusty backyard, that plate of ribs, and that woman with the stubborn smile was the beginning of something that would change everything. There's a moment, that split-second heartbeat right before the truth hits you, where the world still feels normal, untouched, even hopeful. That's where I was when Haley and I had been dating for nearly 2 months, wrapped in that rare and quiet bliss that feels more like discovery than routine. We weren't rushing anything, but there was an undeniable rhythm between us, slow dinners that turned into late-night drives, deep conversations over coffee, and the kind of laughter that comes from finally letting your guard down. And then it happened, one harmless Sunday. She left her phone on my kitchen counter when she ran out to grab pastries. A notification popped up. A missed call from E. Matthews. My stomach dropped, but I told myself it was a coincidence. Still, when she came back through the door with a warm bag of croissants and that same gentle smile, I knew I had to ask. I didn't accuse her. I didn't snap. I just said it quietly, almost like I didn't want the answer. Haley, what's your last name? She looked up, mid-laugh, and the way her smile faltered before the words even left her lips told me everything. Matthews, she said, barely a whisper. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush the air between us. I nodded, stared at the floor, tried to breathe. You're Eli's sister? Her eyes widened in horror, and she dropped the bag onto the counter like it had suddenly burst into flames. Wait, you're Eli? She asked, hands trembling. The one Kendra? And just like that, the pieces collided. I watched her face crumble, her voice break as she pieced it together. Oh my God, Derek, I didn't know. I swear to God, I had no idea. She sat down hard on the bar stool and put her head in her hands. If I had known, I never would have. But she didn't run. That's the part I'll remember most. She didn't deflect. She didn't defend him. Instead, she opened up, really opened up, and what she told me shattered whatever image I still held of the man who wrecked my marriage. She called Eli a narcissist, said he'd always been charming to strangers and cruel to those closest, a master manipulator who left a trail of broken people and broken promises behind him like breadcrumbs no one dared follow. Their parents excused it, enabling him because of his potential, but Haley had spent her entire life walking the tightrope between loving him and surviving him. And somehow, in that messy, emotionally loaded moment, we didn't pull apart, we pulled closer. Because unlike the poison Kendra poured into me, Haley gave me truth. We didn't choose this connection, but maybe that's why it meant more. Because in a world built on lies, we finally found something real. Filing for divorce didn't feel like defeat. It felt like a declaration. I didn't do it out of spite, or anger, or because I wanted to get even. I did it because I was done. Done living like a ghost in my own life. Done waiting for closure from a woman who never offered an ounce of remorse, and done pretending that what we had was anything but dead. I filed the papers quietly, no announcement, no dramatic scene. I let her find out the same way she found everything else worth anything in her life, through paperwork someone else handed her. I heard from mutual friends she laughed when she saw the envelope, told them I was just bluffing, trying to get her attention. He won't go through with it, she said. He's still in love with me. He's just hurting. But I wasn't hurting anymore. I was healing. And healing looks a lot like silence when the other person is still waiting for a reaction that never comes. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday. I wore a charcoal suit, clean-shaved, confident posture, the version of me Kendra hadn't seen in years, the one she never thought would come back. She walked in late, of course, with a smug little smirk like she was walking into a show she was about to headline. Her tone was clipped, rehearsed, leaning into fake concern as if she expected me to crack, to beg, to plead, to ask her why she did it. Instead, I stood up calmly, shook hands with the mediator, and then motioned to the woman beside me. Haley, graceful, composed, radiant without even trying. Kendra froze. Not immediately, but in that slow, dawning horror you see in someone who thought they were untouchable. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her fingers twitched like she was about to speak, but no words came out, just that look, the one you can't fake, shock mixed with jealousy and fear. She tried to maintain control, to keep her upper hand, but the way her voice wavered every time she looked at Haley told the whole story. She wasn't angry that I moved on. She was furious that I moved on better. And worse? With someone connected to her lover, someone who knew the same dirt and chose to rise above it. Kendra interrupted the mediator 3 times. She tried to derail the session with irrelevant accusations, tried to paint herself as the victim, but the more she talked, the more unstable she looked. Meanwhile, I remained calm, collected, unshaken. And for the first time since she walked out that door in her little black dress and told me she deserved to feel alive, I felt like I was the one who had one. And Kendra? She finally realized the man she threw away had built something better without her. You can lie to your spouse, cheat on your vows, and parade your affair like it's a trophy, but you can't outrun the truth forever. And eventually, the truth doesn't whisper. It screams. That scream came about 3 weeks after our mediation, when a friend of mine from the gym, a guy who also happened to be married to one of Kendra's old PTA circle friends, casually dropped a bomb over post-workout smoothies. Man, everyone's talking. You handled that divorce like a king. Didn't know you were with Eli's sister though, poetic. And just like that, I knew the story had finally leaked. I hadn't told anyone. Neither had Haley. But someone did. Maybe a friend of a friend. Maybe a coworker. Doesn't matter. What mattered was, the town we used to call ours suddenly had a front row seat to the very scandal Kendra had once tried to downplay. And Kendra? She couldn't spin it fast enough. She started losing people fast. Her girls' night group stopped inviting her. Neighbors she used to gossip with now waved at me when I drove past and stared at her like she was contagious. Parents at our daughter's school started whispering behind her back. And it wasn't long before the school board politely removed her from 2 committees due to concerns about public perception. But it was Eli who cracked first. I don't know how exactly it all fell apart. Maybe his job caught wind. Maybe his parents finally listened to Haley for once. Or maybe the shame just outpaced the thrill. But he disappeared from her life almost overnight. One day they were posting vacation selfies with filtered sunsets and smug hashtags. The next, Kendra was blocking him on Facebook and calling him a coward. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. Karma had pulled up a front row seat and brought popcorn. The part that still surprises me? Haley never once celebrated it. Never smirked or said, "I told you so." She just held my hand while we walked past the mess and reminded me that this, the peace, the clarity, the second chance, wasn't about vengeance. It was about freedom. Meanwhile, Kendra tried to claw her way back into relevance. New hair, staged selfies, even reaching out to a few of my family members to clear the air. But it was too late. The image she built, the one of a woman too bold to be caged, too strong to be wrong, had cracked wide open, and what was left underneath wasn't empowered or free. It was pathetic. She gambled her life on a lie, and when it finally unraveled, she had no one left to blame. And that was justice I didn't even have to deliver. Life did it for me. Loud, unforgiving, and long overdue. The day Haley moved and wasn't marked by a grand gesture or some dramatic milestone. It happened on a rainy Thursday, with cardboard boxes, shared laughter, and the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen. But for me, it was the quietest kind of triumph. I stood there, watching her stack books onto the shelf that used to hold framed memories of a life with Kendra, and it hit me just how far I'd come. There was no bitterness left in my chest, no more sleepless nights wondering why I wasn't enough. I had stepped through fire and emerged clean, sharper, and more awake than I'd been in years. The house felt different now, lighter, warmer, like it had shed the weight of lies and finally become a place worth calling home again. And me? I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. The man in the mirror no longer flinched at his own reflection. Word around town had shifted, too. I wasn't the poor guy whose wife cheated anymore. I was the man who rebuilt his life with dignity, class, and just the right amount of quiet revenge. Business was booming again. My crew respected me more than ever. I had neighbors coming up to shake my hand and tell me how I handled it like a damn movie character. And maybe I did. But the real power wasn't in what I showed them. It was in what I refused to give back to Kendra. My energy, my sadness, my silence. Meanwhile, she moved into a smaller place, traded in the Mercedes Eli gifted her for something older, humbler. She started posting vague quotes online about growth and letting go of toxic people, hoping anyone, would still see her as the victim. But the comments stopped coming. The invitations dried up. And I heard, through someone I used to call a friend, that Kendra now spends most weekends alone, scrolling through old pictures, asking mutual friends what Haley sees in me. The irony is, she still doesn't get it. You see, betrayal doesn't break a man. It tests him. And when you pass that test, when you claw your way out of the rubble with your head high and your heart still beating, the world takes notice. Some men crumble after being cheated on. They lose themselves in the wreckage, bury their worth in someone else's absence. But not me. I rose. I took every piece of pain she handed me, and I built something better. I took back my peace. I took back my power. And without ever raising my voice, I reminded her, and the world, exactly who I was. And this time, I didn't have to lose anything to win.